Everything was supposed to be a normal case until it turned into a competition. He shows up 2 minutes late just to annoy her. She times him. The judge sighs. Co-workers start betting, and nobody can tell if it's hate, sport, or something far more dangerous. The coffee shop on Fifth Avenue had exactly 3 things going for it: decent espresso, terrible jazz music, and the kind of corner booth that let Amelia Sinclair conduct business calls without the entire establishment listening in. She'd claimed that booth as her own personal office every Tuesday morning for the past 6 months. Today was no exception. Amelia tapped her pen against the leather portfolio in front of her, phone pressed to her ear as her client, Mrs. Patricia Henderson, wife number 3 of a particularly sleazy hedge fund manager, launched into another tirade about her soon-to-be ex-husband's many inadequacies. "I understand, Patricia. Yes, I know he's insufferable. That's precisely why we're divorcing him and taking half of everything he owns." Amelia's voice was cool, professional, with just enough edge to remind her client who was actually in charge of this case. She glanced at her watch. 8:45. The preliminary hearing was in 2 hours, and she still hadn't laid eyes on the opposing counsel. According to the case files, some hotshot attorney from Morrison and Associates had taken over the husband's defense last minute. "What do we know about their lawyer?" Patricia asked, her voice sharp with anxiety. Amelia flipped through her notes with one hand, taking a sip of her cappuccino with the other. "Not much. He's apparently good. Won 3 high-profile divorces last year. But don't worry, these types are all the same." She rolled her eyes, voice dripping with disdain. "Probably another arrogant peacock who thinks the courtroom is his personal runway. You know the type. Expensive suits, practiced charm, more style than substance." What Amelia didn't notice was the man sitting 2 tables over. Elliot Winslow had been reviewing his case notes when her voice carried across the half-empty cafe. He'd looked up at arrogant peacock, one eyebrow raising with interest. By personal runway, he was fighting a smile. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that had just enough silver at the temples to suggest experience rather than age. His suit was admittedly expensive, charcoal grey, perfectly tailored, but he'd never considered himself a peacock. A hawk, maybe, something with talons. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. Elliot studied her with growing amusement. She was younger than he'd expected, late 20s maybe, with sharp features and honey-brown hair pulled back in a severe bun that somehow made her look both intimidating and oddly interesting. She wielded her pen like a weapon, marking up documents with quick, precise strokes. She was still talking, completely oblivious to her audience of one. "The Morrison firm is all flash and no substance," Amelia continued, her tone dismissive. "I've dealt with them before. They'll probably try to intimidate us with legal jargon and aggressive posturing, but it's all theatre. We just need to stick to the facts and let their lawyer tire himself out strutting around the courtroom." Elliot bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. "Patricia, I need to go. I'll see you at the courthouse at 10:30. And please, for the love of everything holy, do not wear the red dress." "We want sympathetic, not seductive." Amelia ended the call and immediately began organizing her files with the kind of methodical precision that bordered on obsessive. Elliot watched her for another moment, considering his options. He could introduce himself now, watch her face turn interesting shades of red. But where was the fun in that? He stood, gathering his own leather briefcase and coffee cup. As he passed her table, he slowed just enough to let her notice him, which she didn't, too absorbed in color-coding her tabs, and then leaned down, voice low and amused. "Personal runway? Interesting. I'll have to remember that one." Amelia's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Excuse me." But Elliot was already walking away, one hand raised in a casual wave, not bothering to turn around. He could feel her staring at his back, probably trying to figure out if she'd just been insulted or complimented or neither. By the time he reached the door, he allowed himself a full smile. 2 hours until showtime, he thought. This is going to be fun. Back at the corner booth, Amelia sat frozen, pen suspended in mid-air. Her mind raced backward through the conversation, trying to remember exactly what she'd said. Personal runway, arrogant peacock. Oh God, had she mentioned the Morrison firm by name? She looked toward the door where the stranger had disappeared. Tall, well-dressed, definitely expensive suit. too composed to be a random eavesdropper making a weird joke. A cold sensation trickled down her spine. No, 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 that couldn't have been... She grabbed her phone, pulling up the case file, scrolled to the attorney information. The Morrison firm had sent over a headshot last week, but she'd barely glanced at it, too focused on the actual legal strategy. She clicked the attachment now. The photo loaded. Elliot Winslow, senior partner. The same dark hair, the same sharp jawline, the same infuriatingly amused expression. Amelia dropped her phone on the table and let her forehead fall into her hands. Perfect, she muttered to the empty air. Just perfect. Her cappuccino had gone cold. Her carefully organized files suddenly seemed inadequate, and somewhere in the city, her opposing counsel was probably laughing his expensive suited ass off. She had 2 hours to prepare for battle, and he'd already drawn first blood. Amelia arrived at the courthouse at exactly 10:15. 15 minutes early was her standard operating procedure. It gave her time to claim the best seat at the defendant's table, organize her materials, and project an air of unshakable confidence. Today, she needed every second of that buffer. She'd spent the past 2 hours oscillating between mortification and fury. Mortification because she'd basically insulted the man to his face without knowing it. Fury because he'd clearly enjoyed every second of her humiliation. Personal runway. God, I'm never living that down. Patricia Henderson met her in the hallway wearing, thank God, a tasteful navy suit instead of the red dress. They exchanged brief pleasantries before entering courtroom 4C, a wood-paneled room that smelled of old books and older grudges. Amelia's practiced composure lasted approximately 45 seconds. That's how long it took for Elliot Winslow to walk through the door. He moved with the kind of easy confidence that came from winning too many cases and knowing exactly how good he looked doing it. The charcoal suit had been replaced by navy pinstripe, equally expensive, equally perfectly tailored. His client, the sleazy hedge fund manager, scurried behind him like a nervous terrier. Elliot's eyes found Amelia immediately. His mouth curved into that same infuriating almost smile from the cafe. "Miss Sinclair." He crossed the room, hand extended. What a pleasant surprise. Liar, Amelia thought. You knew exactly who I was this morning. She stood gripping his hand firmly enough to make a point. Mr. Winslow, how lovely that we're finally meeting. I've heard so much about Morrison and Associates. Have you? His handshake was warm, controlled. He held on just a fraction longer than necessary. Funny. I've heard quite a bit about you too. Just this morning, in fact. Amelia's smile could have cut glass. I'm sure you have. They released simultaneously, both stepping back like boxers retreating to their corners. She's even better when she's angry, Elliot thought, taking his seat across the aisle. The severe bun had been traded for a slightly softer updo, though her expression remained sharp enough to draw blood. She'd worn a charcoal suit, probably on purpose, matching his morning coffee ensemble, and minimal jewelry. All business, all armor. He liked that she didn't apologize. Liked that she met his eyes directly, chin raised, ready for war. This is going to be much more interesting than I thought. The preliminary hearing was supposed to be straightforward, establish the timeline, confirm documentation, set the discovery schedule. Judge Martinez, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, had a reputation for running a tight ship and tolerating exactly zero grandstanding, which made what happened next entirely Amelia's fault. Or Elliot's, depending on who was telling the story. It started with the asset disclosure. Your Honor, Amelia began, standing with her notes carefully arranged. The plaintiff has provided a comprehensive list of marital assets, which we believe to be complete and accurate. However, we have concerns about certain discrepancies in the defendant's initial filing. Concerns? Elliot interrupted smoothly, not bothering to stand. That's a diplomatic way of saying you're questioning my client's honesty. Judge Martinez looked up. Mr. Winslow, Ms. Sinclair has the floor. Of course, Your Honor. My apologies. He didn't sound apologetic at all, his eyes locked with Amelia's, glinting with challenge. Amelia's jaw tightened. As I was saying, there are discrepancies, specifically regarding the vacation property in the Hamptons, which Mr. Henderson claimed was purchased post-separation. It was, Elliot countered, finally standing. The closing date is clearly documented. The closing date, yes, but the initial deposit was made 4 months prior, while they were still married, making it marital property. A deposit doesn't constitute ownership, Mrs. Sinclair. Surely you learned that in first-year property law. The courtroom went very quiet. Amelia's smile was deadly sweet. I did, Mr. Winslow. Right around the same time we covered the definition of good faith disclosure. Perhaps you were absent that day? Judge Martinez's gavel came down with a sharp crack. Counsel, both of you. This is a preliminary hearing, not a verbal sparring match. She fixed them both with a withering stare. Though I have to say it's only 10:45 and I already need aspirin. This does not bode well for the rest of these proceedings. My apologies, Your Honor, Amelia said, sitting down with perfect posture. Likewise, Elliot added, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. The judge sighed. I'm setting the discovery deadline for 4 weeks from today. You'll both submit your witness lists by the 15th. And I'm strongly suggesting— Her emphasis made it clear this was not actually a suggestion— that you two attempt to mediate this case before we waste the court's time with a full trial. Amelia opened her mouth to protest. That means, Judge Martinez continued, speaking over her, you'll be working together, frequently. I'm ordering joint mediation sessions starting next week. Across the aisle, Elliot was trying very hard not to smile. Amelia was trying very hard not to throw her legal pad at his head. After the hearing, they ended up in the courthouse hallway at the same time, gathering their materials from the benches outside the courtroom. Joint mediation, Elliot said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. This should be entertaining. For you, maybe. Amelia shoved files into her briefcase with more force than necessary. I find enforced proximity to opposing counsel tedious at best. Tedious. That's the word you're going with. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Did you want me to use excruciating instead? Because I can absolutely do that. Please don't hold back on my account. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, completely at ease. I appreciate honesty, as you demonstrated so beautifully this morning at the cafe. There it was, the direct hit she'd been waiting for. Amelia's cheeks warmed, but she refused to look away. How you could have introduced yourself. Where's the fun in that? Fun? She snapped her briefcase closed. You think this is fun? Ms. Sinclair, if I'm going to spend the next several weeks in mediation with you, I might as well enjoy myself. His smile was absolutely infuriating. Besides, you have to admit, Personal Runway was inspired. Despite herself, despite everything, Amelia felt her lips twitch. She killed the smile before it could fully form. See you next week, Mr. Winslow. Looking forward to it, Ms. Sinclair. She walked away, back straight, heels clicking against the marble floor with sharp, precise strikes. Behind her, she could feel him watching, and she absolutely, definitely did not care. The post-it note war began innocently enough. Elliot had submitted his witness list 3 days before the deadline, a perfectly reasonable time frame that demonstrated both professionalism and efficiency. He'd even double-checked the formatting, making sure everything was pristine. The document came back 2 days later with 7 neon yellow post-it notes attached. The first one, stuck to the cover page, read, Paragraph 3, line 7. Aforementioned is redundant here. Just say mentioned. We're lawyers, not Victorian novelists. The second, page 4. You misspelled recommendation. Ironic, given you're recommending a spelling expert as a witness. By the 7th note. Overall, C+. See me after class. Elliot was laughing so hard his assistant knocked on the door to make sure he was okay. Oh, Miss Sinclair wants to play games? He spent the next hour crafting his response. Amelia's financial disclosure came back covered in pink post-its. Pink. The audacity. Line 12. Excellent use of semicolon. Gold star. Page 6. This paragraph is so thorough it's almost romantic. Are you trying to seduce the judge? Page 9. Found a typo. Just kidding. Wanted to keep you on your toes. And the final note, stuck to the signature line. Overall, B+, marked down for excessive perfectionism. It's unsettling. Amelia stared at the documents for a full minute, a strange warmth spreading through her chest that she absolutely refused to identify as amusement. Then she reached for her green post-its. Their first official mediation session was scheduled for Thursday at 2 o'clock. Elliot arrived at 2:02. Amelia, who had been sitting in the conference room since 1:50, made a show of checking her watch as he entered. Traffic? She asked sweetly. Something like that. He set his briefcase down, completely unruffled. Shall we begin? The mediator, a patient man named Richard who had been doing this for 30 years, looked between them with barely concealed concern. The next session, Elliot arrived at 2:04. Amelia started timing him. 2 minutes and 37 seconds, she announced as he walked in. You're getting worse. Am I? Elliot settled into his chair, arranging his papers with deliberate slowness. I hadn't noticed. Clearly, punctuality isn't a strength of yours. And clearly, passive aggression isn't a weakness of yours. Richard the mediator cleared his throat. Perhaps we could focus on the case? They both turned to him with identical expressions of innocence. Of course, Amelia said. Absolutely, Elliot agreed. The mediator didn't believe either of them. She times me, Elliot thought during their third session, fighting a smile as Amelia made another note in her leather-bound planner. She actually keeps track. That's either incredibly petty or incredibly adorable. He was leaning toward adorable, though he'd never admit it. The truth was, he'd started arriving late on purpose after that first session. Something about the way her jaw tightened, the way her pen tapped against her notebook in that precise, irritated rhythm, it was too entertaining to stop. Plus, it gave him an extra minute to watch her through the glass door before entering, to notice small things, the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, the small furrow between her eyebrows when she was frustrated, the fact that she always wore the same silver watch on her left wrist. He was noticing too many things. Mr. Winslow? Richard's voice cut through his thoughts. Your thoughts on splitting the Hamptons' property? Elliot refocused, meeting Amelia's eyes across the table. She was watching him with that sharp, assessing look that made him feel like a witness under cross-examination. I think, he said slowly, that Ms. Sinclair has made some valid points about the deposit timeline. We might be willing to negotiate. Amelia's eyebrows rose fractionally. Might be. Depending on your client's position regarding the art collection. The Rothko was purchased with my client's inheritance money. The Rothko was purchased during the marriage, making it marital property regardless of funding source. That's not... Amelia caught herself, took a breath. You know that's not how inheritance works. Then explain it to me. He leaned back, arms crossed. I'm all ears. The look she gave him could have frozen hell. You're doing this on purpose, she said quietly. Doing what? Being deliberately obtuse. I'm being thorough. You of all people should appreciate thoroughness. He paused. Unless excessive perfectionism is off the table? Her cheeks flushed pink. Whether from anger or something else, he couldn't tell. Didn't want to analyze too closely. Richard intervened before Amelia could respond. Let's take a 15-minute break, please. The mediator looked like he needed a drink. In the hallway, Amelia paced. He's insufferable, arrogant, deliberately antagonistic. And somehow, despite all of that, she'd laughed at his stupid post-it notes, had actually looked forward to their sessions, even knowing he'd be late, even knowing he'd find some way to get under her skin. She hated that she'd checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror before today's meeting. Hated that she'd chosen the emerald blouse instead of the standard white one, because the color made her eyes look brighter. Hated that when he'd said she made valid points, something warm had bloomed in her chest. Get it together, Sinclair. He's the enemy, this is war. But war had never felt quite like this before. When she returned to the conference room, Elliot was already there, early for once. He looked up when she entered, and for just a second something unguarded flashed across his face. Then the mask was back, the slight smirk, the easy confidence. Ready to continue, Ms. Sinclair? Amelia sat down, straightening her files. Always, Mr. Winslow. Richard looked between them, sighed deeply, and reached for his coffee. It was going to be a very long mediation. Their second court appearance happened 2 weeks into mediation. Judge Martinez took one look at them walking into her courtroom. Amelia from the left door, Elliot from the right, both arriving at exactly the same moment and stopping short to avoid collision, and closed her eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. Good morning, Your Honor, they said in unison, then glared at each other. The judge's sigh was audible throughout the courtroom. Counsel, she began, removing her glasses to pinch the bridge of her nose, please tell me you've made progress in mediation. Substantial progress, Your Honor, Elliot said smoothly. Define substantial, Amelia muttered under her breath. I'm sorry, Ms. Sinclair, did you have something to add? Amelia stood, smile polite and absolutely lethal. Only that Mr. Winslow's definition of substantial and mine may differ slightly. His client has been less than cooperative regarding the disclosure of certain offshore accounts. Those accounts are clearly separate property, which were funded by marital assets, a claim you have yet to substantiate. If you would stop interrupting me. If you would stick to facts instead of speculation. Crack. The gavel hit the bench with the force of a gunshot. Enough. Judge Martinez's voice could have cut steel. I've been on this bench for 23 years. I have presided over murders, corporate fraud, and custody battles that would make Medea blush. And yet somehow, you two managed to give me a headache faster than any of them. Amelia had the grace to look slightly ashamed. Elliot's expression remained perfectly neutral, though his jaw tightened fractionally. The judge continued, "You will continue mediation. You will be civil. And if I have to see you in my courtroom one more time, bickering like children fighting over a toy, I will hold you both in contempt. Are we clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," Amelia said quietly. "Crystal clear, Your Honor," Elliot added. "Good. Get out of my courtroom, and take your client drama with you." They ended up in the elevator together. Of course they did. The doors closed with a soft ding, trapping them in 12 square feet of polished steel and mounting tension. Amelia stared at the numbers. Floor 7, floor 6, floor 5. "That went well," Elliot said dryly. "Did it?" She didn't look at him. "I hadn't noticed, what with the contempt threat and all." "She wouldn't actually hold us in contempt." "You don't know that. I know that we're both good at our jobs, and sometimes that means pushing boundaries." Amelia finally turned to face him. "Is that what you call it? Pushing boundaries? What would you call it?" "Being deliberately antagonistic. Takes two to tango, Mrs. Sinclair." The elevator lurched slightly, just a normal shift between floors. But Amelia stumbled, and suddenly Elliot's hand was on her elbow, steadying her. The contact sent a shock of awareness through her entire body. They froze, his hand warm against her skin, even through the fabric of her blazer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something cedar and expensive and entirely too distracting. "You okay?" His voice had dropped, gone quieter, concerned. Amelia's heart was doing something irregular and entirely unprofessional. "Fine, I'm fine." He released her immediately, stepping back to his corner of the elevator. Floor 2, floor 1. The doors opened to the lobby, and Amelia practically fled into the marble expanse, needing air, needing space, needing to not think about the way her skin still tingled where he'd touched her. What the hell was that? Elliot stood in the elevator for a moment after she'd gone, trying to get his pulse under control. It had been nothing. A simple, steadying touch. The kind of thing anyone would do. Except his hand was still warm from where it had been on her arm. And he could still smell her perfume. Something subtle, vanilla and jasmine, lingering in the small space. He'd noticed the way her breath had caught, the way her pupils had dilated slightly. "Stop it. She's opposing counsel. This is a case. Nothing more." The elevator doors started to close. Elliot caught them stepping out into the lobby. Amelia was nowhere in sight. Probably for the best. Their working lunches became routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, they'd meet at the mediator's office and spend 2 hours hammering out details. Then Richard would politely suggest they continue their discussion over lunch, mostly, Elliot suspected, so the poor man could have a break. Today, they'd ended up at a small Italian place 2 blocks from the courthouse. Amelia ordered the caprese salad, no balsamic, extra basil. Elliot ordered the same thing, then changed it to balsamic on the side when she gave him a look. "What?" he asked innocently. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "That thing where you pretend to be agreeable just to throw me off balance. Maybe I just like caprese salad." "You do realize that every time we've eaten together, you order whatever I order." Elliot paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "I do not." "Monday. I got the Caesar wrap. You got the Caesar wrap. Coincidence. Last Thursday. Minestrone soup. It was cold outside. And you claimed to hate soup. Your exact words were, 'Soup is just sad sandwich filling.'" He had said that, damn. "Fine." Elliot set down his fork. "Maybe I trust your taste. Or maybe you're just contrary. Can't it be both?" Amelia's lips twitched. She took a sip of water to hide it. But he saw. Small victories. "Tell me something," he said, leaning back in his chair. "When did you decide to become a lawyer?" The question caught her off guard. He could tell by the way her expression shifted, professional mask slipping just slightly. "Why do you want to know?" "Because we've spent 3 weeks arguing about property division, and I know more about your client's art collection than I know about you. We're not supposed to know about each other. We're opposing counsel. We're also 2 people eating lunch. Humor me." Amelia considered this, turning her water glass in slow circles. "My parents divorced when I was 12. Their lawyers were terrible, more interested in billable hours than actual resolution. It took 3 years and destroyed what little relationship they had left. So you wanted to do better. I wanted to fix what they broke. She met his eyes directly. Your turn. Why law? Elliot smiled slightly. My father was a judge, wanted me to follow in his footsteps. And did you? Clearly not. I'm on the other side of the bench, arguing instead of presiding. Rebellious. Practical. I'm much better at arguing than listening patiently. I've noticed. They ate in companionable silence for a moment, the lunch crowd bustling around them. Can I ask you something else? Elliot said finally. That depends on the question. Why do you always wear that watch? He nodded toward the silver piece on her wrist. I've never seen you without it. Amelia's hand moved automatically to cover it, protective. It was my grandmother's. She raised me after my parents. After the divorce. She must have been special. She was. Amelia's voice went soft. She taught me that being strong doesn't mean being unbreakable, just means knowing how to heal. Something shifted in Elliot's chest, something warm and dangerous and entirely unexpected. Oh no. That's beautiful, he said quietly. Amelia looked up, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The waiter arrived with the check, shattering whatever spell had been weaving itself between them. Elliot reached for it automatically. So did Amelia. Their hands collided over the leather folder. I'm paying, she said. We can split it. You paid last time. Then I'm on a roll. She glared at him. He grinned back. Finally, she released the check. Fine, but next time is mine. Deal. They stood to leave, gathering coats and briefcases. Outside, the autumn air was crisp, leaves scattering across the sidewalk in small tornadoes. Same time Thursday? Elliot asked. Same time, Amelia confirmed. She started to walk away, then paused, looking back. Elliot. It was the first time she'd used his first name. Yeah? Your father was wrong. You're a good lawyer. Before he could respond, she was gone, disappearing into the lunch crowd. Elliot stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her go. We're in trouble, he thought. I'm in trouble. But he was smiling. The courthouse parking garage was deserted by 6:30. Amelia had stayed late finishing discovery responses, and now she was paying the price, standing in the dim fluorescent lighting, staring at her very flat rear tire with a mixture of frustration and resignation. Perfect. Just perfect. She crouched down to inspect the damage, completely flat, and her spare was at home because she'd been meaning to replace it for 3 weeks and kept forgetting. Of course this happens today. Of all days. She pulled out her phone. 2% battery. Because why would anything go right? Need help? Amelia's head snapped up so fast she nearly lost her balance. Elliot stood 10 feet away, briefcase in one hand, car keys in the other, looking entirely too amused by her predicament. No, she said immediately. I'm fine. You're crouching next to a flat tire with a dead phone. Almost dead. And I said I'm fine. Amelia. The sound of her first name in his voice did something strange to her equilibrium. He'd never used it before. Always Ms. Sinclair, formal and proper and safe. She stood, brushing imaginary dust from her skirt. I'll call a rideshare. With what battery? I have enough for 1 call. Do you have a spare tire? Silence. Elliot's mouth curved into that infuriating almost smile. Let me give you a ride. Absolutely not. Why not? Because being in a small enclosed space with you sounds dangerous. Because we're opposing counsel. It's inappropriate. We have lunch together twice a week. That's different, that's work. And this is basic human decency. He jangled his keys. Come on, Sinclair, I promise not to bill you for the mileage. She wanted to refuse, wanted to stand there stubbornly until her phone died and she was forced to walk 3 miles in heels. Wanted to maintain her dignity and her distance and all the careful walls she'd built. But her feet hurt, she was hungry, and the thought of walking home in the dark wasn't appealing. Fine, she said through gritted teeth, but I'm only accepting because it's practical. Obviously, wouldn't dream of suggesting otherwise. Elliot's car was exactly what she'd expected. Sleek, black, expensive. A Mercedes sedan that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. She slid into the passenger seat, immediately feeling out of place among the leather and polished wood trim. He started the engine and classical music filled the space. Chopin, if she wasn't mistaken. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Classical? You were expecting what? Heavy metal? I don't know. Something more aggressive. I save my aggression for the courtroom. He pulled out of the parking garage. Address? She rattled off her street, then sat back, acutely aware of how small the car suddenly felt. How his cologne, cedar and something darker, filled every breath. How his hands looked on the steering wheel, confident and steady. Stop it, stop noticing. So, Elliot said, breaking the silence, do you make a habit of driving on bad spares, or is this a new hobby? I was going to replace it. When? Next year? I've been busy. Too busy for basic car maintenance? He glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. That's very unlike you. You're the most organized person I know. You don't know me that well. I know you alphabetize your legal briefs. I know you arrive everywhere exactly 15 minutes early. I know you drink your coffee with 2 sugars and no cream, and you always tap your pen 3 times before you write. Amelia stared at him. You've been watching me. We've been working together for a month, I pay attention. That's not paying attention, that's stalking. It's observing. Big difference. He turned onto her street. Besides, you do the same thing. I do not. You do. You know I take my coffee black. You know I always arrive exactly 2 minutes late to mediation. You notice that I order whatever you order at lunch. That's different. You're deliberately antagonizing me. I have to keep track. Keep telling yourself that, counselor. They pulled up in front of her building, a modest brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but solid. Safe. Elliot put the car in park, but didn't turn off the engine. Thank you, Amelia said stiffly, for the ride. You're welcome. He paused. I can help with the tire tomorrow if you want. I'm actually decent with cars. You? She couldn't hide her skepticism. In your $1,000 suit? I own other clothes. Shocking, I know. Despite herself, Amelia smiled. I'll manage. But thank you. She reached for the door handle. Amelia. She looked back. His expression had gone serious. The teasing edge vanished. You know we're not really enemies, right? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications she wasn't ready to examine. Aren't we? She asked softly. I don't know, are we? She didn't have an answer to that. Wasn't sure she wanted to find one. Good night, Elliot. Good night, Amelia. She got out of the car, climbed the steps to her building, and didn't look back until she was inside. Through the window, she could see his car still parked at the curb, waiting until she was safely inside. He waited. He actually waited to make sure I got in okay. Something warm and terrifying unfurled in her chest. Upstairs in her apartment, Amelia kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine and tried very hard not to think about cedar-scented cologne and the way her name sounded in his voice. She failed spectacularly. Elliot sat in his car for another minute after she disappeared inside, hands still on the steering wheel, trying to figure out when exactly this had stopped being just a case. You're in trouble, he thought again. Serious trouble. He put the car in drive and headed home, Chopin playing softly, the passenger seat still holding the faint scent of vanilla and jasmine. Tomorrow, he'd go back to being professional, proper, opposing counsel. Tonight, he'd let himself admit the truth. Amelia Sinclair was getting under his skin, and he wasn't entirely sure he wanted her to stop. The annual Bar Association Gala was the kind of event Amelia normally avoided. Overpriced wine, underwhelming food, and 3 hours of forced networking with lawyers who spent the entire evening comparing case wins like they were trading baseball cards. But her firm had insisted, so here she was, wearing a black cocktail dress and her most professional smile. She'd been strategically avoiding certain people all evening, specifically one particular person, when fate intervened. Miss Sinclair. The hostess appeared at her elbow with a clipboard. We're doing assigned seating for dinner. You're at table 7. Amelia made her way to the table, scanning the place cards. Her name was positioned between Judge Martinez, who'd probably spend the entire meal reminding her to be civil, and no, 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 no. You've got to be kidding me, she muttered. Problem, counselor? Elliot appeared beside her, devastatingly handsome in a black tuxedo that should be illegal. His bow tie was slightly crooked, which somehow made him look even more attractive, and Amelia hated herself for noticing. We're seated together, she said flatly. So we are. He pulled out her chair with exaggerated chivalry. Fate works in mysterious ways. Fate had nothing to do with this. Someone in event planning has a sick sense of humor. or excellent taste in dinner companions. He settled into his own chair, immediately draping his arm along the back of hers. Relax, Amelia. I promise not to argue about property division over the salmon. The casual intimacy of his arm behind her made her skin prickle with awareness. She shifted forward, putting distance between her back and his hand. He noticed. Of course he noticed. His smile widened. Dinner began with all the speeches and toasts that made these events interminable. Amelia focused on her food, on the conversation Judge Martinez was having with the woman to her left, on literally anything except the man beside her. It was working reasonably well until Elliot leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. "You look beautiful tonight," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. Every nerve ending in Amelia's body lit up like a switchboard. A shiver ran down her spine, so intense she nearly dropped her fork. She froze, not trusting her voice. Elliot pulled back slightly, and she could see the exact moment he registered her reaction. His eyes darkened with something that looked distinctly pleased. "Are you cold?" he asked, voice innocent but eyes wicked. "You're shivering." "I'm fine," she managed, proud that her voice came out steady. "Are you sure?" "I could get you my jacket." I said I'm fine. He leaned in again, arm sliding further along her chair back. "You know, for someone who's fine, you're awfully tense. Maybe because you're invading my personal space." "Am I?" His fingers, those long, elegant fingers she'd watched sign documents and gesture during arguments, brushed against her bare shoulder. Just barely. Just enough. "My apologies." He didn't sound sorry at all. He sounded like he was enjoying every second of her discomfort. Amelia's pulse was hammering. Heat crept up her neck, and she knew, absolutely knew, that her cheeks were flushed. This was ridiculous. She was a professional, a grown woman. She'd faced down hostile judges and aggressive opposing counsel without breaking a sweat. But one whisper from Elliot Winslow and she was falling apart. "Tell me, Amelia," he continued, that low voice doing dangerous things to her equilibrium. "Do I make you nervous?" "Don't be absurd." "Then why can't you look at me?" She turned her head sharply, meeting his eyes directly. Big mistake. He was closer than she'd realized, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his dark eyes, the slight stubble along his jaw, the curve of his mouth. "There she is," he said softly. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten I was here. I wish I could." "Liar!" The word was barely a whisper, but it hit her like a physical touch. Amelia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Several people glanced over. "Excuse me," she said to no one in particular. "I need some air." She didn't wait for a response, just grabbed her clutch and headed for the hallway that led to the restrooms, her heels clicking sharp staccato against the marble floor. Behind her, she heard Elliot's chair move. "No, don't follow me. Please don't." His footsteps echoed behind hers. Of course he followed. Amelia turned sharply in the empty corridor, fury and something much more dangerous coursing through her veins. "What do you want?" Elliot stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking infuriatingly calm. "To make sure you're okay." "I'm perfectly fine. You ran away from the table." "I didn't run. I walked, quickly. Because I made you uncomfortable. Because you're insufferable." He took a step closer. "Am I?" "Yes." Another step, and her back hit the wall. "You're arrogant and smug and you're beautiful when you're angry." He was directly in front of her now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Has anyone ever told you that?" "Elliot." He raised one hand slowly, giving her time to move away. She didn't. His thumb brushed her cheek, feather light, traced down to her jaw, her chin. His touch was impossibly gentle, completely at odds with the intensity in his eyes. Amelia's breath caught. Her heart was doing something complicated and entirely unprofessional against her ribs. Elliot leaned down, and for one wild moment she thought he was going to kiss her. Instead, his mouth moved to her ear. "Don't be angry with me, beautiful." The endearment, spoken in that low, rough voice, did something catastrophic to her nervous system. Before she could respond, before she could think, he stepped back, that infuriating smile back in place. "See you back at the table, Miss Sinclair." He had the audacity to wink. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her pressed against the wall, heart racing, skin tingling where he'd touched her. Amelia stayed there for a full minute, trying to remember how to breathe. What the hell just happened? And more importantly, why was she disappointed he'd walked away? The firm's annual cocktail reception was supposed to be a brief appearance. Shake some hands, make small talk, leave before the senior partners started their third round of war stories. Amelia had it down to a science. Arrive at 7, exit by 8:15, home by 8:30 with takeout and terrible reality television. The plan was going smoothly until she spotted him across the room. Not Elliot, though he was there too, deep in conversation with one of the name partners, looking unfairly attractive in charcoal grey. No, the him in question was Marcus Chen, her ex-boyfriend from law school. Tall, classically handsome, with the kind of easy charm that had attracted her at 23, and now at 28 seemed almost performative. Amelia Sinclair. Marcus appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne, offering her one with a practiced smile. Still breaking hearts and winning cases, I see. She accepted the glass out of pure reflex. Marcus, I didn't know you'd be here. Just joined Patterson and Hayes last month. Corporate law. He leaned against the high-top table beside her, close enough that she had to tilt her head to maintain comfortable eye contact. You look incredible. That emerald color is stunning on you. Thank you. Amelia took a small sip of champagne, already calculating her exit strategy. How have you been? Better now. His smile widened. I've been following your career. That Meadows case last year? Brilliant work. It was a team effort. Don't be modest. You were always the smartest one in our class. He shifted closer, his hand coming to rest on the table beside hers, not quite touching but definitely in her space. I always regretted how things ended between us. We were good together. Were we? Amelia thought. She mostly remembered him forgetting their anniversary 3 times and prioritizing networking events over actual conversation. That was a long time ago, she said diplomatically. Doesn't mean it can't happen again. Marcus's voice dropped to what she assumed he thought was a seductive tone. We're both more established now, more mature. Maybe we should get dinner sometime, catch up properly. Across the room, Elliot had stopped pretending to listen to the senior partner. He'd noticed Marcus approximately 30 seconds after the man approached Amelia, had watched him lean in with that practiced smile, had seen the way he invaded her personal space with the confidence of someone who'd clearly done this before. And Elliot absolutely definitely did not care, except his jaw had gone tight. His grip on his whiskey glass had increased to the point where his knuckles were white, and he'd completely lost track of what the senior partner was saying about tort reform. Elliot, your thoughts? He made a non-committal sound, eyes still tracking Amelia across the room. She was smiling politely at whatever drivel the pretty boy was saying. That wasn't her real smile. Elliot had learned to distinguish between her professional smile and the genuine one that made her eyes crinkle slightly at the corners. This was definitely the professional version. Still, the guy was touching her arm now, leaning in like he had every right to be in her space. Who the hell is he? I should... Elliot started to excuse himself, then stopped. What was he going to do, march over there and interrupt? He had no claim on Amelia. They were colleagues, adversaries, people who happened to share lunch occasionally and engage in elaborate post-it note warfare, that's all. Keep telling yourself that, Winslow. He turned back to the senior partner with what he hoped was an attentive expression and absolutely did not spend the next 10 minutes resisting the urge to look back. He lasted 7. So, what do you say? Marcus was saying, his hand now definitely on Amelia's forearm. Dinner. For old time's sake, I don't think... Amelia. She turned to find Elliot standing beside their table, expression perfectly neutral, except for something sharp and dangerous in his eyes. Elliot. Relief flooded through her, immediate and telling. I didn't see you come over. Clearly. His gaze flicked to Marcus, then back to her. I hate to interrupt, but I need to steal you for a moment. Case matter. It was absolutely a lie. They both knew it. Marcus frowned. Can't it wait? We were just... No, Elliot said flatly. It can't. Amelia set down her champagne glass. Of course. Marcus, if you'll excuse me. She let Elliot guide her away with his hand barely touching the small of her back, the contact sending electricity up her spine despite the layers of fabric between them. They ended up in a quieter corner, near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. There's no case matter, is there? Amelia asked. Not even a little bit. Then why... Who was that? The question came out sharper than he'd intended. Amelia's eyebrows rose. Marcus, an old classmate from law school. Classmate. Elliot's tone suggested he had other, less charitable terms in mind. He seemed very friendly. We dated, briefly, years ago. Something dark flashed across Elliot's face. And now he wants to reconnect. How romantic. Are you... Amelia studied his expression, surprise giving way to realization. Are you jealous? Don't be absurd. He took a sip of his whiskey, jaw still tight. I simply don't appreciate interruptions during business functions. He wasn't interrupting anything. Wasn't he? You looked uncomfortable. I was handling it. By letting him paw at your arm for 10 minutes? He wasn't pawing. Amelia stopped, a smile tugging at her lips despite herself. You were watching us. I was observing outdated flirting techniques. Consider it research. Research. Academic research. His approach was textbook. Compliments, manufactured nostalgia, strategic touching. Elliot's voice was dry as dust. I'm surprised he didn't offer to carry your books. Amelia laughed. The sound was bright and genuine, completely unguarded, and it hit Elliot like a physical blow. He'd heard her laugh before. Small chuckles, sardonic huffs, but never like this. Never this full, uninhibited joy that transformed her entire face. Oh no. He liked that sound, liked it far too much. Wanted to hear it again, wanted to be the reason for it, wanted... This was getting complicated. What? Amelia asked, still smiling. Why are you looking at me like that? Like what? Like you've just realized something terrible. You have no idea. Just wondering if we should get you back to your admirer, Elliot said, defaulting to sarcasm because it was safer than honesty. He's probably waiting with another glass of champagne and more recycled pickup lines. I have no interest in going back to Marcus. No? No. She met his eyes directly. I'd rather stay here. The air between them shifted, charging with something electric and dangerous. Elliot set down his whiskey glass on the windowsill, never breaking eye contact. Why? Because... Amelia hesitated, seeming to wage an internal battle. Because his compliments feel hollow. Because he touches me like it's his right. Because when he talks I'm already planning my escape route. And when I talk? She stepped closer, near enough that he could smell her perfume. When you talk, I forget to plan anything at all. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Elliot's hand came up slowly, fingers curling around the back of her neck, thumb brushing her jaw. Amelia. Mr. Winslow, the senior partner's voice boomed across the room. Need you for a moment. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. I should... Elliot gestured vaguely toward the partner. Yes, of course. He started to walk away, then turned back. Amelia, for what it's worth? He smiled, smaller and more genuine than his usual smirk. I'm glad you stayed. Me too, she admitted quietly. This time, when he walked away, she let herself watch him go. And across the room, Marcus Chen, with all his practiced charm and strategic compliments, was already forgotten. The mediation session on Thursday morning was going remarkably well. For the first time in 6 weeks, they'd managed to discuss asset division without a single argument. Richard, the mediator, looked almost hopeful, like maybe, just maybe, they'd actually settle this case without killing each other. Amelia was in the middle of proposing a compromise on the vacation property when her phone buzzed. She ignored it. She always silenced her phone during meetings. It buzzed again, and again. I'm so sorry, she said, reaching for it. I thought I'd turned this off. 7 missed calls, all from her sister's number. The blood drained from Amelia's face. Before she could process the panic rising in her chest, the phone rang again. She answered immediately. Sophie. What? Amelia? Her sister's voice was shaking, young and scared. I'm sorry, I didn't want to bother you, but I'm at the hospital, and they said I should call family, and I didn't know who else. Hospital? Amelia was already standing, gathering her things with trembling hands. What happened? Are you okay? I had an accident at the gym. Fell off the treadmill like an idiot and hit my head. They think I might have a concussion and my wrist really hurts and... Which hospital? St. Mary's. But you don't have to come, I know you're working. I'm coming, stay there, don't move, I'm coming right now. Amelia ended the call, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Sophie was 22, her baby sister, the only family she had left after their grandmother passed 2 years ago. Concussion, head injury, hospital. The words kept circling in her mind, each one worse than the last. I have to go, she said to Richard, her voice strange and distant. My sister, she's at the hospital, I need to... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't think past the rising panic. "Of course," Richard said immediately. "Go, we can reschedule." Amelia was already moving toward the door when Elliot's voice stopped her. "Amelia, wait." She turned. He was standing now, briefcase forgotten, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. "You can't drive like this," he said quietly. "I'm fine. Your hands are shaking. You're pale. You just tried to put your phone in your briefcase 3 times. He walked toward her, movements calm and deliberate. "Let me drive you." I know you don't need me to." His hand settled gently on her elbow, steadying. "But I'm offering anyway, please." The please did it. Amelia nodded, not trusting her voice. Elliot's Mercedes cut through traffic with the kind of efficiency that came from knowing every shortcut in the city. He didn't try to make conversation, didn't offer empty reassurances, just drove, one hand on the wheel, his presence solid and steady beside her. Amelia gripped her phone, checking it compulsively, even though Sophie had promised to text if anything changed. "She's going to be okay," Elliot said finally, voice low. "You don't know that." "You're right. I don't." He glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "But I know that St. Mary's has an excellent emergency department. I know that if they thought it was serious, they would have told your sister immediately. And I know that you're strong enough to handle whatever comes next." Something in Amelia's chest loosened slightly. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly the right thing without making it sound like a platitude." "Years of practice talking to terrified clients." He turned into the hospital parking lot. "Plus, I have 3 younger sisters. I've done the emergency room panic run more times than I can count." "You have 3 sisters?" All of them significantly more accident-prone than your average human." He pulled into a spot near the entrance, turning to face her fully. "One time, my youngest sister called me from the hospital because she'd gotten her hand stuck in a vending machine trying to retrieve stuck Doritos. She was 17. Despite everything, Amelia felt her lips twitch. "Did you get her hand out?" "Eventually, after the fire department arrived." He reached over, squeezing her hand briefly. "What I'm saying is it's probably not as bad as you think. But even if it is, you're not alone." The words settled around her like a blanket. "You're not alone." When was the last time someone had said that to her? When was the last time she'd let anyone say that? "Thank you," she whispered. "Come on." He opened his door. "Let's go find your sister." Sophie was in the ER waiting room, looking young and sheepish with a bandage on her forehead and her wrist in a temporary brace. "Amelia!" She stood up quickly, then winced. "Ow! Okay, standing fast was a bad choice." Amelia was across the room in seconds, pulling her sister into a careful hug. "You scared me half to death." "I know. I'm sorry. I'm fine, really. Just clumsy." Sophie pulled back, noticed Elliot standing a respectful distance away. "Who's that?" "That's..." Amelia hesitated. "What was he? Colleague? Adversary? Something more?" "That's Elliot. He drove me here." Sophie's eyes went wide with recognition. "Wait, Elliot as in opposing counsel Elliot? The one you've been..." She made a vague gesture. "You know, the one from all the stories." "Sophie," Amelia warned. "What stories?" Elliot asked, moving closer, clearly amused. "Nothing," Amelia said quickly. "She talks about you constantly," Sophie said, ignoring her sister's death glare. "It's very entertaining." "Sophie Sinclair, I will leave you here." "Ms. Sinclair?" A nurse appeared with a clipboard. "The doctor wants to run a few more tests, just to be safe. We'll be taking Sophie back in a moment." "Can I come with her?" Amelia asked immediately. "Of course. Just follow me when we call her." The nurse disappeared back through the double doors. Sophie looked between Amelia and Elliot, a knowing smile playing on her lips despite her injuries. "You should go back to work. I'm fine, seriously. It's just a bump on the head and a sprained wrist." "I'm staying until they clear you," Amelia said firmly. "I'll stay too," Elliot added, "if that's okay." Amelia looked at him, really looked. He'd cancelled his afternoon, driven across the city, and was now offering to sit in an uncomfortable hospital chair for however long it took. This man who she'd insulted in a coffee shop, who she'd battled in court, who drove her absolutely crazy with his 2-minute tardiness and his infuriating smiles. This man who was so much more than she'd given him credit for. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "I know." He settled into the chair beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "But I'm going to anyway." When the nurse finally called Sophie back 90 minutes later, clean CT scan, minor sprain, released with instructions to rest, Elliot was still there. He'd brought them coffee from the cafeteria, had fielded work calls quietly in the corner so Amelia could stay focused on her sister, had made Sophie laugh with stories about his disaster-prone youngest sister. As they walked back to his car, Sophie insisting she was fine to walk despite Amelia's hovering, Elliot fell into step beside her. "Thank you," Amelia said again. "For today. For all of it. Any time." He meant it. She could hear it in his voice. "I mean it, Elliot. You didn't have to—" She stopped walking, turning to face him in the parking lot. "You keep surprising me. Good surprises or bad surprises?" "Good ones," she smiled, small but genuine. "Definitely good ones." Something shifted in his expression. Softened. Good. The ride back to her car was quiet, comfortable. When he pulled up next to her vehicle in the courthouse garage, her tire had been fixed that morning, thank God, Amelia found herself reluctant to leave. "See you at mediation next week?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it." He paused. 2 minutes late, as always. She laughed, and his answering smile was worth every moment of panic from earlier. As she drove home with Sophie in the passenger seat, her sister was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, "He's in love with you." "What? No, we're just—" "Amelia." Sophie turned to her, serious despite the bandage on her head. "I saw the way he looked at you, like you were the only person in that entire hospital." Amelia gripped the steering wheel tighter. She didn't have an answer for that, wasn't sure she was ready for one. But somewhere between the courthouse and the hospital, between panic and relief, between adversary and something else entirely, everything had changed. Amelia had been thinking about revenge for 3 days. 3 days since the hospital. 3 days since Elliot had been unexpectedly kind and impossibly thoughtful. 3 days of her brain ping-ponging between gratitude and the memory of him whispering, "Don't be angry with me, beautiful," in that corridor. He'd gotten under her skin. On purpose. With full intention. And she hadn't forgotten. So when she spotted him through the window of Giovanni's, an upscale Italian place downtown, having what looked like a business dinner with a client, Amelia made a decision. A terrible, impulsive, completely out-of-character decision. Payback. She checked her reflection in her compact mirror. The wine-colored blouse was still pristine, her hair still in its professional twist. She looked capable, controlled. She felt absolutely reckless. Amelia pushed through the restaurant door, taking a table in the corner where she could watch Elliot without being obvious. He was deep in conversation, probably discussing strategy, completely oblivious to her presence. Good. She ordered wine and pretended to review documents on her tablet while she waited, and watched. He laughed at something his client said, that genuine laugh she'd heard so rarely, signed the check with a flourish, stood, shaking hands. The client left. Elliot headed toward the back of the restaurant. Now or never, Sinclair. Amelia gave him a 30-second head start, then followed. The hallway leading to the restrooms was quiet, dimly lit, exactly like the corridor at the gala. Fitting, really. She caught him just as he was about to push through the men's room door. "Elliot." He turned, surprise flashing across his face before settling into that familiar amusement. "Amelia. Are you following me, counselor? I need to talk to you. Here. Now?" He leaned against the wall, completely at ease. "Couldn't this wait until—" She moved closer. Close enough that he had to look down at her. Close enough that she could see his pupils dilate slightly. "No," she said quietly. "It can't wait." What is she doing? Elliot's brain was working overtime trying to process the sudden shift. Amelia was in his space, deliberately, purposefully, and there was something different in her eyes. Something dangerous. Something that made his pulse kick up several notches. "What did you need to talk about?" he managed, proud that his voice sounded almost normal. She smiled. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and was enjoying every second of it. "This." Her hand came up slowly, fingers trailing across his chest over his tie, the touch light enough to be barely there but heavy enough to send electricity through every nerve ending. "Oh. Oh no." Elliot's breath caught as her hand slid higher, fingers playing with his collar, then moving to the back of his neck. Her touch was confident, deliberate, absolutely nothing like the skittish woman who'd blushed at his whisper 3 days ago. "Amelia." His voice came out rougher than intended. "What are you—" "Shh." She pulled him down gently, and he went, helpless against whatever spell she was weaving. "Don't talk." Her lips touched the corner of his mouth. Not quite a kiss. Not quite not a kiss. Just enough contact to make his entire body go rigid with want. Elliot's hands clenched at his sides, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to grab her, to pull her closer, to turn his head just slightly and capture her mouth with his. Control. Maintain control. Then she made it worse. Her mouth moved to his ear, breath warm against sensitive skin. "Seems like you're not so immune to me after all." The words, an echo of what he'd said to her, hit him like a bucket of ice water. She's playing me. This is revenge. And damned if it wasn't working. Amelia started to pull away, that satisfied smile playing on her lips, thinking she'd won. Not today, counselor. Elliot moved faster than thought. One hand caught her waist, spinning her until her back hit the wall with a soft thud. The other hand braced beside her head, caging her in. "Did you really think," he said, voice low and dangerous, "that you could provoke me like that and just walk away?" Her eyes went wide. "Elliot." "My turn." He stepped closer, eliminating what little space remained between them. "You want to play games? Fine. But remember who taught you the rules." His hand slid into her hair, fingers tangling in the careful twist she always wore. He pulled gently but firmly, tilting her head back until her neck was exposed. The small gasp she made went straight through him. "Not so confident now, are you?" He leaned down, letting his breath ghost across her skin. "Tell me, Amelia, did you plan this? Did you think about how you'd touch me, what you'd say?" "Yes," she admitted, the word barely a whisper. "And did you think about what I'd do in return?" Her breath hitched as his lips brushed the sensitive spot just below her ear. "No. Mistake." He pressed a kiss there, light as air. "You should always anticipate your opponent's moves." He dragged his mouth down slowly, trailing kisses along her neck, her jaw mapping the taste of her skin. She was trembling now, her hands clutching at his shoulders like she needed the support. Good. Fair is fair. When he reached the corner of her mouth, the exact spot she'd kissed him, he paused, lips hovering just barely above hers. "Amelia," he murmured against her skin. "Yes? You're going to think about this moment." Another soft kiss, this time on her jaw. "Tonight, when you're home alone. Tomorrow, during mediation. Every time you see me. You're—" Her voice was shaky. "You're insufferable. I know." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, saw them dark and dazed and absolutely beautiful. "But so are you." Then he released her completely, stepping away with what he hoped looked like casual confidence, and not the near-total loss of control he actually felt. Elliot straightened his tie, smoothed his jacket, channeled every ounce of composure he possessed. "I really do know how to play this game, beautiful." He reached out, his thumb brushing her lower lip for just a second. "Better than you, apparently." Her mouth opened, closed. No words came out. Victory. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, Ms. Sinclair." He turned and walked into the men's room, somehow managing not to stagger. Inside, alone, Elliot braced his hands on the sink and stared at his reflection. His tie was crooked. His hair was disheveled from where she'd touched it. His pupils were blown wide. He looked like a man who'd just barely won a battle. Barely. In the hallway, Amelia remained frozen against the wall. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it. Her skin still tingled everywhere he'd touched. Her lips felt swollen even though he hadn't actually kissed them. He won. Again. She'd planned the perfect revenge, had thought she'd finally get the upper hand, had been so sure she could affect him the way he affected her. And she had. She'd seen it in his eyes, felt it in the tension of his body, but then he'd turned it around on her with devastating efficiency. "You should always anticipate your opponent's moves." Amelia pushed off the wall on shaky legs, heading back to her table. Her wine was waiting. She downed half of it in one go. Across the restaurant, Elliot emerged from the hallway, looking perfectly composed. He caught her eye, raised his own glass in a small salute, that infuriating smile back in place. Amelia glared at him. He winked. "This isn't over," she thought fiercely. Not by a long shot, but as she gathered her things to leave, one thought kept circling through her mind, refusing to be silenced. She'd never wanted to kiss someone more in her entire life, and judging by the way he'd looked at her, the way his hands had trembled slightly despite his control, he felt exactly the same way. The question was, Who would break first? The rumor started somewhere between the third floor and the courthouse cafe. By Tuesday morning, it had spread through the legal community like wildfire through dry brush, gaining embellishments with each retelling. Amelia first heard about it from her assistant Maya, who burst into her office at 8:15 with coffee and barely contained glee. "So," Maya said, setting down the cup with exaggerated casualness, "interesting news this morning." Amelia didn't look up from her brief. "If this is about the Patterson settlement, I already know. It's about you and Elliot Winslow." The pen stopped moving. "Excuse me? Apparently you two are dating. Have been for weeks. Janet from the clerk's office heard it from someone who heard it from someone at Giovanni's who saw you together. There's also something about a hospital parking lot." Maya was practically vibrating with excitement. "So, is it true?" "Absolutely not." The denial came out sharp. Too sharp. Maya's eyebrows rose. "That was very emphatic. Because it's very untrue. We're opposing counsel. We're working on a case together, that's all. You're also having lunch together twice a week. Working lunches. You called him by his first name last Thursday. So? You never call anyone by their first name. Judge Martinez has been asking you to call her Elena for 3 years. Amelia pinched the bridge of her nose. "Maya, we are not dating. There's nothing romantic happening. Can we please focus on actual work?" Maya's tone suggested she believed exactly none of that. "You know, for someone who doesn't have feelings, you're awfully defensive about it." "I'm not defensive, and you're blushing." "I am not." Amelia caught sight of herself in the window reflection. Her cheeks were definitely pink. It's warm in here." "It's 68 degrees. Don't you have filing to do?" Maya grinned, completely unrepentant. "Oh, I'm going to enjoy watching this play out." She headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you two would be great together. He makes you smile. Like, actually smile. It's nice." Before Amelia could form a response, denial, agreement, she wasn't sure which, Maya was gone. Amelia stared at her brief without seeing it. "This is ridiculous. There's nothing to... We're just..." Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Unknown. Heard an interesting rumor this morning. Care to comment?" "Yep, to you." Of course he had her number. They'd exchanged contact information during mediation. Amelia, completely false. Obviously. Elliot. Obviously. I told my partner the same thing. Amelia, good, we're on the same page. Elliot, absolutely. Totally unfounded gossip. Amelia, exactly. Elliot, though I have to ask, why are we both texting in such short sentences? Amelia, I don't know what you mean. Elliot, very defensive, for something that's completely untrue. Amelia, I'm not being defensive. Elliot, that's exactly what someone being defensive would say. Amelia threw her phone onto the desk with more force than necessary. Across town, Elliot was having a similar conversation with his best friend and colleague, James. So you're not sleeping with opposing counsel, James said, leaning against Elliot's desk with a coffee and an insufferable smirk. No. You're not dating her? No. You haven't thought about kissing her? Elliot's pause was a fraction too long. James's smirk widened. Oh, this is beautiful. There's nothing to tell. Then why did you just hesitate? I didn't hesitate. You absolutely hesitated. I counted. 3 full seconds. James took a sip of coffee, clearly enjoying himself. The lawyer who's been driving you crazy for 2 months has gotten under your skin. How poetic. She hasn't gotten under my skin. Elliot. You cancelled 3 client meetings to drive her to the hospital. Her sister was hurt. You arrive late to mediation specifically to irritate her. That's strategic. You smile at your phone when she texts you. I've seen it, multiple times. Elliot opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. And last week you spent 20 minutes explaining to me why her legal strategy on the Henderson case was brilliant. 20 minutes. About opposing counsel's strategy. It was objectively good work. Face it, man, you're gone. James set down his coffee, expression shifting to something more serious. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Elliot ran a hand through his hair. Nothing, we're working on a case, it's professional. Professional, right. Is that what we're calling the way you look at her? I don't look at her any particular way. You look at her like she's the only person in the room. Like she's solving quantum physics while simultaneously inventing fire. It's actually disgusting how obvious you are. James, also you haven't dated anyone in 4 months. Since you took this case. Coincidence? It wasn't a coincidence. Elliot knew it wasn't a coincidence. Every other woman felt flat, uninteresting. They didn't challenge him, didn't make him laugh with perfectly timed sarcasm, didn't look at him like they could see straight through every defense he'd built. They weren't her. It's complicated, he said finally. It's only complicated if you make it complicated. James stood, heading for the door. For what it's worth, I haven't seen you this alive in years. The lawyer who takes you out of your senses and apparently out of your sleep. She's good for you. I sleep fine. You came in yesterday with coffee stains on your shirt and your tie inside out. You were too distracted thinking about her to dress yourself properly. Had he? Elliot tried to remember. Drew a blank. Damn. After James left, Elliot sat at his desk, staring at his phone. The text conversation with Amelia was still open, short, clipped sentences, both of them denying too much, too quickly. For something that's completely untrue, we're both working very hard to convince everyone. His phone buzzed. Amelia. People are going to keep talking, aren't they? Elliot. Probably. Legal community loves gossip almost as much as actual law. Amelia. What do we do? Elliot. Ignore it. Eventually something more interesting will happen. Amelia. You're right. This is ridiculous anyway. We're professionals. Elliot. Exactly. Professionals. A pause. Then, Amelia. Though I suppose if the rumor bothers you that much, we could avoid each other, outside of required mediation. Elliot stared at the message. The thought of not seeing her, not having their Tuesday and Thursday lunches, not trading barbs in the courthouse hallway, not watching her eyes light up when she landed a particularly good argument, made his chest tighten uncomfortably. Elliot. Does the rumor bother you? Amelia. I asked you first. Elliot. I'm asking you second. Amelia. Elliot. Elliot. Amelia. Another pause, longer this time. Amelia. No, it doesn't bother me. Not really. Elliot. Good. Because it doesn't bother me either. Amelia. So we'll just continue as normal? Elliot. See you at mediation Thursday, 2 minutes late, as tradition dictates. Amelia. I'll be timing you. Elliot. I'd expect nothing less. Elliot set down his phone, a smile tugging at his lips despite himself. Let people talk. Let them speculate. Because the truth he was only now beginning to admit to himself, was that the rumor wasn't entirely wrong. He was falling for Amelia Sinclair, had been falling for weeks if he was honest, probably since that first morning in the coffee shop when she'd called him a peacock, and he'd known instantly that she was going to be trouble, the best kind of trouble. The question now was whether she felt the same way, and whether either of them was brave enough to do something about it. The settlement came together on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. They'd been in mediation for 4 hours, circling the same issues, getting nowhere. Patricia Henderson wanted the Hamptons property. Her husband wanted the art collection. Both were digging in their heels. Richard looked like he was contemplating early retirement. What if, Amelia said suddenly, interrupting another round of circular arguments, we split both? Everyone turned to look at her. Hear me out. She leaned forward, that sharp intelligence Elliot had come to admire fully engaged. The Hamptons house gets sold. Proceeds split 60-40 in Mrs. Henderson's favor, accounting for her initial contribution. The art collection gets divided by a neutral appraiser. Each party chooses half based on assessed value, not personal preference. That's... Patricia's husband started to object. Fair, Elliot interrupted, meeting Amelia's eyes across the table. That's completely fair. He'd seen where she was going immediately. By removing the emotional attachment, the battles over specific pieces, they'd eliminate the primary obstacle to settlement. It was brilliant. We'd need specific language about the appraisal process, he added, picking up her thread. Timeline for sale of the property. Division of any maintenance costs in the interim. Already thought of that. Amelia pulled out her laptop, fingers flying across the keys. I drafted a framework last night, just in case. Of course she had. Elliot smiled despite himself. Show me. They worked together for the next 2 hours, refining language, closing loopholes, anticipating objections before they arose. Their clients watched in something like awe as the 2 lawyers who'd spent 8 weeks fighting tooth and nail suddenly became a seamless team. By 6 o'clock, they had a settlement. Richard looked like he might cry with relief. After the clients left, both satisfied, both convinced they'd won, Amelia and Elliot remained in the conference room, gathering their materials in comfortable silence. "That was good work," Elliot said finally. "It was your support that made it work." She looked up, genuine warmth in her expression. "You could have fought me, could have protected your client's initial position, but you didn't, because you were right." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "You're usually right." "It's infuriating." "Is it?" "Completely." He was close enough now to smell her perfume, that vanilla and jasmine that had haunted him for weeks. "We should celebrate. The case is settled. We're no longer opposing counsel." The implication hung in the air between them. "What did you have in mind?" Her voice was carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed her interest. "Champagne. My place. Nothing complicated." He paused. "Unless you'd rather not." "I'd like that," she said quickly. "I'd like that a lot." Elliot's apartment was exactly what she'd expected. Sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Books lined one wall, actual books, not just law journals. A piano sat in the corner, surprising and somehow perfect. "You play?" Amelia asked, running her fingers along the keys. "Badly, but it helps me think." He emerged from the kitchen with 2 champagne flutes and a bottle that probably cost more than her monthly car payment. "My grandmother taught me. Said every person should have something that has nothing to do with their work." "That's beautiful." She was. He poured, handed her a glass. "To brilliant legal strategies and the lawyers who devise them. To partnerships that work," she countered, clinking her glass against his. The champagne was crisp, perfect. They moved to the couch, and Amelia found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, maybe years. "Can I tell you something?" Elliot said after a moment. "Of course." "That first morning at the cafe." He smiled at the memory. "I knew you were going to be trouble the second you called me a peacock. I didn't know you were there." "I know. That made it better. You were so confident, so sharp, and then when you realized," he laughed, "the look on your face was priceless." "I was mortified. You were adorable." He set down his glass, turning to face her fully. "And every day since then, you've been—" "Amelia, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. The way you argue, the way you laugh, the way you tap your pen exactly 3 times before you write, the way you look at me like you can't decide if you want to kiss me or throw your briefcase at my head." Her breath caught. "Elliot, I'm not good at this," he continued, voice rougher now, "at the feelings part. I'm much better at arguing and strategic lateness and post-it note warfare. But I need you to know that this," he gestured between them, "isn't a game anymore, hasn't been for a while." Amelia set down her own glass with shaking hands. "I know. You do. The provocations, the revenge attempts, all of it." She met his eyes directly. "It was easier than admitting what I was actually feeling, safer than acknowledging that somewhere between opposing counsel and whatever this is, I started falling for you." The confession hung in the air, raw and honest. Elliot moved slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "No games this time," he whispered. "No provocations. Just us. Is that okay?" "Yes," she breathed. He kissed her. Finally. Actually kissed her. It was nothing like their almost kisses, their teasing touches. This was real, deep and intense, and everything she'd imagined and more. His mouth moved against hers with a hunger that matched her own, and she made a small sound that made him pull her closer. Amelia's hands slid into his hair, tugging slightly, and he groaned against her lips. The sound sent heat spiraling through her entire body. "I've wanted to do this," he murmured against her mouth between kisses. "For so long." "Me too." She pulled back just enough to look at him, seeing her own desire reflected in his eyes. "Stay," he said softly. "Please stay." It wasn't really a question. "Yes," Amelia answered anyway. This time when he kissed her, there was no doubt about where they were heading, and neither of them wanted to stop. Elliot led her to his bedroom with gentle hands, fingers intertwined with hers, neither of them speaking because words felt unnecessary. The room was darker than the living room, lit only by the city lights filtering through the windows. Intimate. Safe. He turned to face her, and for a moment they just looked at each other, the weight of what was about to happen settling between them. "We don't have to," he started. Amelia silenced him with a kiss, softer than before, but no less certain. "I want this," she whispered against his mouth. "I want you." His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the buttons of her blouse, and the vulnerability in that small shake made her heart ache in the best way. "I'm nervous," he admitted quietly, fingers pausing. "You? Nervous?" She smiled, covering his hands with hers. The man who faces down judges without breaking a sweat. "This is different." He looked at her with such raw honesty it took her breath away. "You're different. This matters." "To me too," she whispered. They undressed slowly, carefully, trading soft touches and softer kisses. Each piece of clothing that fell away revealed not just skin but trust, layers of protection being shed one by one. When she stood before him in nothing but moonlight, Elliot's breath caught audibly. "You're beautiful," he said, voice rough with emotion. "So beautiful." His hands mapped her body like she was something precious, something to be cherished. He traced the curve of her shoulder, the line of her spine, the soft skin of her stomach, each touch reverent and unhurried. Amelia had never felt so seen, so wholly accepted. They moved to the bed together, and Elliot took his time, worshipping her with hands and mouth, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. He whispered her name like a prayer against her skin, told her she was perfect in a dozen different ways. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming intimacy of being this close to another person, this vulnerable, this open. "Okay?" He breathed against her neck, holding still despite the tension in his body. "More than okay," she managed, fingers digging into his shoulders. "Don't stop." They moved together slowly at first, learning each other's rhythms, building something more than just physical pleasure. This was connection, real and raw and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. Elliot held her gaze as they moved, one hand cradling her face, thumb brushing away the single tear that escaped. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you." And she believed him. When release finally came, for both of them, together, perfect timing even in this, it felt like something fundamental had shifted in the universe. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts still racing, skin damp with sweat, neither willing to move and break the spell. "That was—" Amelia started. "Yeah," Elliot agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It really was." She laughed softly, and he pulled her closer, fitting her against his body like she'd always belonged there. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Amelia's last coherent thought was that she'd never felt safer in her life. Amelia woke to soft morning light and the sound of snoring. Not loud, obnoxious snoring. Just a gentle, rhythmic sound coming from the man beside her. She turned carefully to look at him. Elliot was on his back, one arm thrown over his head, mouth slightly open, completely relaxed in sleep, and definitely snoring. It was possibly the most endearing thing she'd ever seen. When he woke 20 minutes later, she'd been watching him sleep like a creeper, but she didn't care. His first words were, "Why are you smiling at me like that? You snore." "I do not." "You absolutely do. I have audio proof. You did not record me." "I considered it." She stretched, and his eyes tracked the movement with clear appreciation. "But I decided blackmail was inappropriate this early in the relationship." "This early in—" He grinned, pulling her back down against him. "So we're in a relationship?" "Well, I slept in your bed. In socks, apparently, which you haven't commented on." "I noticed. Wondered if you were cold. I always sleep in socks." "That's—" He paused, clearly trying to find the right word. "Weird. I was going to say adorable. But yes, also weird." She swatted his chest. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Coffee?" he offered. "Please." They moved to the kitchen, Amelia wearing his shirt, which fell to mid-thigh and made him look at her like he wanted to forget about coffee entirely, and Elliot in sleep pants and nothing else. He made coffee while she perched on the counter, watching. "So," he said, handing her a mug, "this is new territory. Dating your former opposing counsel?" "Dating, period. I'm not usually—" He paused. "I don't usually let people stay." "Why did you let me?" He set down his mug, stepping between her knees, hands settling on her thighs. "Because the thought of you leaving made my chest hurt. Because you fit. Because I'm fairly certain I'm falling in love with you, and that's terrifying, but also the best thing that's happened to me in years." Amelia's breath caught. "Elliot? Too soon?" He looked genuinely worried. "I can take it back." "Don't you dare." She cupped his face, thumbs brushing his jaw. Because I'm falling for you too, have been for weeks. Maybe since the coffee shop. The peacock comment sealed the deal. Absolutely. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and tasting of coffee. Stay today, he murmured against her lips. Stay tonight. Stay as long as you want. I have work. So do I. We'll work from here. I have a laptop. You have a laptop. We'll be very productive. Is that what we're calling it? Would you prefer a different term? She laughed, the sound bright and free. No, this works. And it did. They spent the day exactly as he'd suggested, working from his apartment, stealing kisses between phone calls, ordering takeout, existing in their own small bubble of happiness. Neither of them wanted it to end, so they didn't let it. 3 months into officially dating, Amelia discovered that Elliot Winslow was a complete disaster in the kitchen. How? She asked, staring at the smoking pan. Did you manage to burn water? It's not water. It's supposed to be pasta. He waved a dish towel at the smoke detector, looking adorably flustered. And I didn't burn it. I just evaporated it enthusiastically. That's not a thing. It is now. She rescued the pan, dumping it in the sink with a sigh. You're a brilliant lawyer. You can argue constitutional law in your sleep. How are you this bad at cooking? I have many talents. Cooking isn't one of them. He pulled her against him, chin resting on her head. That's why I keep you around. For my culinary skills. Among other things. His hands slid down to her waist. Your legal mind. Your sarcasm. The way you look in my shirts. I'm wearing jeans and a sweater. My point stands. She turned in his arms, smiling up at him. You're ridiculous. You love it. The words hung between them for a heartbeat. They'd said a lot of things to each other over the past 3 months, confessed feelings, made promises, but those 3 specific words hadn't been spoken yet. I do, Amelia said softly. I love you. Elliot's expression went still, then blazed with something that made her breath catch. Say it again. I love you, Elliot Winslow. Even though you're a menace in the kitchen. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, until she forgot about burnt pasta and smoke detectors and everything, except the feeling of being held by someone who loved her back. I love you too, he murmured against her lips. So much it scares me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared? The best kind of scared. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost too easy. Amelia kept her apartment, but spent most nights at his place. Elliot learned to tolerate her excessive organization of his closet. She learned to ignore his tendency to leave legal briefs scattered across every available surface. They worked cases separately now, no more opposing counsel drama, but often debated strategy over dinner, turning their living room into an impromptu courtroom. You're wrong, Amelia declared one evening, pointing her fork at him accusingly. I'm never wrong. The precedent from the Marshall case clearly supports my position. The Marshall case was overturned in '08. Partially overturned, the relevant section still stands. Does it, though? He pulled out his laptop, already searching. Because I'm pretty sure. Oh, what? You're right. He looked up, grinning. I hate when you're right. No, you don't. You're right about that, too. She threw a pillow at him. He caught it, laughing. These were the moments Amelia treasured most. Not the grand gestures, but the small intimacies. The way he made her coffee exactly right without asking. The way she knew to record his favorite documentary series. The way they could argue about case law and somehow make it feel like foreplay. What are you thinking about? Elliot asked one lazy Sunday morning. They were tangled together in bed, rain pattering against the windows, nowhere to be and nothing to do. How different this is, Amelia said quietly, from what I thought I wanted. Good different or bad different? The best kind of different. She traced patterns on his chest. I used to think love should be calm, predictable, safe. And now? Now I know it can be all those things and still make your heart race, still surprise you, still feel like an adventure. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. You know what surprises me most? What? That I almost let the case end without telling you how I felt. I almost let you walk away. I wouldn't have gone far. You were already under my skin. Good, because I plan on staying there. He paused, and she felt him smile against her hair. Forever, if you'll have me. It wasn't quite a proposal. Not yet, but it felt like a promise. And Amelia held onto it, hoping, believing, that forever with Elliot Winslow was exactly what her future looked like. 6 months after their first night together, Elliot texted Amelia with an unusual request. Elliot, meet me at the cafe on 5th, the one with terrible jazz, 10 a.m. Saturday. Amelia, that's random. Why? Elliot, nostalgia. Humor me. Amelia, fine, but you're buying the coffee. Elliot, deal. Saturday morning, Amelia arrived at exactly 9:50, claiming her usual corner booth out of habit. The cafe looked the same, still serving decent espresso, still playing questionable music, still filled with people conducting business over cappuccinos. Elliot walked in at 10 o'clock sharp, looking unfairly handsome in dark jeans and a sweater that made his eyes even more striking. You're on time, she said as he slid into the booth across from her. Should I be worried? Maybe. His smile was slightly nervous, which was odd. Elliot was never nervous. He ordered 2 cappuccinos, hers with no balsamic extra basil, which made her laugh because wrong drink but the thought counted, and they sat in comfortable silence until the server left. Do you remember the first time we were here? He asked. When I called you an arrogant peacock who treats courtrooms like personal runways, vaguely? That's the one. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I knew that morning that you were going to change my life. I just didn't know how much. Elliot, let me finish. He took a breath. You drive me crazy. You correct my legal briefs with color-coded post-its. You time my arrivals down to the second. You reorganize my closet when you think I'm not looking. I was helping, and I love every second of it. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I love how your mind works. I love how you're not afraid to challenge me. I love that you sleep in socks and make terrible jokes and look at me like I'm the only person in the room. He stood, and Amelia's breath caught as he moved around the table. What are you... Elliot dropped to one knee beside the booth. The cafe went very quiet. Oh my God, Amelia whispered. You once said that courtrooms are like runways for arrogant lawyers, he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. And you were absolutely right. But I've learned that I prefer a different kind of runway. The one that leads to you, to us, to forever. He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring that was so perfectly her that tears immediately sprang to her eyes. Amelia Sinclair, will you marry me? Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her while the entire cafe burst into applause. That was terrible, she laughed against his mouth. The runway line, so cheesy. You loved it. I really did. 8 months later. The wedding was small, intimate, held in a garden overlooking the city. Amelia stood in the bridal suite, checking her watch. 10:58. The ceremony started at 11. Sophie adjusted her sister's veil, smiling knowingly. You're going to be late on purpose, aren't you? 2 minutes. No more, no less. He's going to know what you're doing. That's the point. At 11:02, Amelia walked down the aisle to where Elliot waited, his expression shifting from slight concern to delighted understanding the moment he saw her. When she reached the altar, he leaned down to whisper, 2 minutes. I timed you. Did you expect anything less? Not for a second. They were married under clear skies, surrounded by friends and family, promising forever to the person who had challenged them, changed them, completed them. And when the officiant said, You may kiss the bride, Elliot took his time, kissing her thoroughly enough that someone in the audience wolf whistled. Worth the wait, she murmured against his lips. Every second. 1 year later. You're doing it wrong, Amelia called from the couch. Elliot looked up from the crib he was attempting to assemble. There are literal instructions. How can I be doing it wrong? You put panel A where panel C should go. They're both panels. What difference does it make? The difference between a functional crib and a death trap, he sighed, setting down the screwdriver. You know, when I imagined our first year of marriage, I didn't picture you 7 months pregnant critiquing my furniture assembly from across the room. Really? Because I absolutely pictured exactly this. She was glowing, he thought, radiant in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy glow and everything to do with happiness. Her hand rested on her rounded belly, and every time he looked at her, something warm and overwhelming settled in his chest. Their baby, their future, their life together. Come help me then if you're so smart, he challenged. I would, but I'm growing a human, I'm tired. Convenient excuse. It's called delegation. You should try it. He crossed to the couch, settling beside her and placing his hand over hers on her belly. The baby kicked, and his expression softened completely. "Hello in there," he said quietly. "Still talking to my stomach?" "Our stomach." "And yes." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Someone has to teach this kid proper legal argumentation. They'll learn sarcasm from me. God help us all." She laughed, that bright, beautiful sound he'd never tire of hearing. "We're going to be terrible parents," she said, not sounding worried at all. "The absolute worst," he agreed cheerfully. "We'll argue about bedtime. Debate proper nutrition. Color-code the baby's schedule. You'll arrive 2 minutes late to every school event. You'll time me every single time. Obviously." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined over their growing child, the unassembled crib forgotten. "Elliot? I love this. Us. All of it." He pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "Me too. Even the parts where you tell me I'm doing everything wrong. Especially those parts." "Especially those parts," he agreed. And somewhere in the city, in a cafe with terrible jazz music, life continued. But for Elliot and Amelia Winslow, curled together in their apartment, waiting for their next great adventure, everything was absolutely perfect. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.